Oh,
Uh-oh.
we are live, y'all. Man,
What?
this is your man, Cat.
And this is Quessy, and this is the Cat and Quessy Show. We bring to you self-care, fitness, and finance advice, especially for people of color.
Yeah, this is also brought to you by Heal the Hood, where we go into our inner city communities and we educate, motivate, and inspire those to live a healthier life one day at a time, y'all.
Amen. This show is also brought to you by Alignment Agency, where we go to the inner and the outer city communities, bringing you that information about how to make and save more money. But more than anything, Alignment Agency is where wealth and wellness unite. And today's topic is, let's get a drum roll. Let's get that drum roll going. Today's topic is toxic masculinity and
Ooh,
PIMP culture. Bam! Drop the
oh,
flex bomb.
come on.
Drop the flex bomb. All
What,
right.
what, what?
So
Toxic masculinity.
what
What
is
is
that?
that?
What is that?
Yeah, how
So
do we define that?
oh,
What does that
absolutely.
look like, Brother Quezzy?
Absolutely. So of course, we're gonna bring the information to you live, and you should also know we're learning, we're growing. We are not experts in any sense just because we're men and we got testosterone. That doesn't make us experts on this topic, but we do feel like this is important to discuss. So we wanted to engage the community and our audience, right? So thank y'all who are here with us today. Thank you for posting in the chat box because we're gonna have an engaging conversation. So before we get
And like
started,
always, joining our conversation, if you're getting value out of it, just know that somebody else will always as well get value out of this conversation. So make sure you hear that like, you hit that share, and feel free to comment. We want those comments popping up on the screen so we can have a well-rounded conversation. This is just not a conversation between me and Brother Quezzy. This is a conversation with our community. This is a healing process for all of us, and we want to better understand just different points of views within our community, and where our community is headed to.
that's it. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. So I'd like to start off with a quick video, as we always do with the Cat and Quessy show, just to open people's minds to today's topic and conversation. So this is a really good video from somebody who a lot of us know, love, and admire, speaking on today's topic. So I'm gonna pull this up. It's about 2 minutes short. So I'm gonna share my screen for the
Let's see what
people.
let's see what Brother Quezzy has for us today because he's really
Let's see
good
what
at
he
finding
got.
these videos, y'all.
Let's see what
I
he
don't know
got.
what kind of Google searches he be throwing up there, but he be finding the videos. Uh-oh,
Hey,
I seen this one. I
you
think I
seen this
sent you
one?
this video. Is this the
I think
video I
you sent
sent
me
you?
this video. I think you sent me this video, my brother.
Come
So
on, man.
we
See,
already in
look at that.
alignment.
That's one for Cat and Quezzy.
That's it. That's it. Putting points on the board. But I'm gonna press play. Stay with me.
I chose the right one for sure. Yeah. My dad is cool too. Let's not get it confused. My mom is amazing.
Yeah.
My dad is amazing too, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Just not those ways.
Yeah. Yeah, different strengths.
Yeah, different strengths.
And different teachers for different lessons.
Yeah. A lot of personality traits I picked up from him.
Yeah.
For sure. He's somebody who loves first.
Yeah.
And that's something that you don't get. He's somebody who's open-hearted, and very gentle, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And he grew up in Monroe, Louisiana, where he had to run for his life and he would get beat up for being black, and he's dealt with a lot of pain and trauma. And one of the things that I inspired him to do was go see therapy, and that was one of the most emotional moments for me, because it was like, I know him and my Uncle John as black men growing up in Louisiana, and all the stuff that they've been through. My dad told me he felt like I didn't know that, he was like, I didn't talk to you about certain things because guys aren't supposed to talk about certain things. We're not supposed to open up about that. As crazy as that sounds, right? Because it's different now.
Totally.
People are more comfortable talking about mental health now. People are, there are discussions. There are people who will relate, right?
Yeah.
But that really was a stigma. That really was
100%.
something that you couldn't talk about.
100%.
And it messed him up.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's still working on that right now.
Totally. I mean, can you imagine holding it in for that long and not feeling you can share it, and being told you're not allowed to feel that as a man? And I mean, there's a lot of toxicity that comes with that.
Yeah, and getting beat up.
Yeah, I mean that. Yeah,
You know, he said he would run for his life sometimes, man. Like to
Yeah.
make it past these train tracks. It's crazy, man.
That's insane. That's intense.
Yeah.
But that's something that you. It sounds like from your journey, you haven't.
Wow.
All right, so we'll come back to that. But Cat, hot takes. Talk to me, brother.
Yeah, no, that is a very real thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like my dad's generation and going back, right, had to hold in a lot of things, and especially in our community, right? It's like I think it was so much that our ancestors had to see and endure, right? Where it couldn't be on the top of their mind each and every day. They had to suppress a lot of emotions, a lot of feelings, you know what I'm saying? And that got passed down from generation to generation where, you didn't talk about seeing your wife getting raped right in front of you or in front of the kids or anything like that or whatever may have happened, you know, and even males getting raped and different things going on at that particular time. You know what I'm saying? Like all that trauma that you had to take in, that had to be suppressed and just, it's over, it's done. I'm not talking about it. It never happened. Right. And then you kind of put it in the back of your conscious wherever you could hide that. And then how much damage did that do to our community living those type of lives? And then teaching our youth to do the exact same thing, you know? Like that's what that makes me think of because I know my dad has seen a lot in his life, but he doesn't, he's not a very expressive when it comes to his emotions, right? I think I've only seen my dad cry once, and that was at my grandmother's funeral. And besides that, you know, anything else, he brushed it off. Like it wasn't too much. Like when my pops was mad, you know he was mad, like he was 110. But besides that, just brushing stuff off, you know.
Yeah, and
So
I'm really glad you brought that up because I realize like as men in this society, there are safe emotions. There are safe emotions that we can express without fear of judgment, without fear of like being
consider
sissified.
soft.
Yeah, like for
Yeah.
lack of a better word, right? And one of those emotions is anger, right? And that's something that I could definitely relate to, growing up, especially as a black man in this society, with all the things that happen to all men in reality, but especially speaking from my own experience, with all things that happen to us, even anger sometimes is a luxury, right? Of the ability to express our anger without fear of repercussion or consequence, right? And I realized that a lot of these things, if not most and all of them, go back to slavery, at least for us, like
Yeah.
black men in this society. And it does make it difficult to, like, if you aren't aware of the origins, it does make it difficult to understand why things exist the way that they do, even with your father, who obviously wasn't a slave, right?
Yeah.
But in some ways, it's still dealing with those repercussions, right? And I feel like more than anything, and part of what we're going to do in this conversation is really unearth those origins, right? Where did this idea of toxic masculinity come from? And I feel like we can start and we should start by identifying what is masculinity versus what is toxic masculinity. So I want to hear from you, Kat, like just your personal opinion. If you had to define masculinity versus toxic masculinity, like where would you draw that line at?
Mm, I would say toxic masculinity, and in my own personal opinion, um, is a male that feels like he has to control everything. You know what I'm saying? Like one of those kind of males that say, you're going to do what I say in the sense of a relationship and everything and shelter people. Um, I feel like that's the toxic masculinity. Now, just being masculine is, I feel like that. What is masculinity? That's a great question. How would I define masculinity? Um, you got to give me a second on that one. You got to
Yeah,
give me
no,
a
that's
second
real.
on that one.
That's
Yeah.
real. And like That's such an important question because I feel like, especially in this generation, in the generation coming up behind us, there's there's a really interesting conversation that's happening around masculinity and femininity and gender roles, right?
Yeah.
Like that's just like that's huge. You know, like really, you remember the Pokemon video games, like they had the red game and the blue game and
Uh-huh.
like the yellow game and all those things, right? Like that's what we talked about as kids, right? Like
Yeah.
Pokemon cards, like Yu-Gi-Oh, like Power Rangers, like Rugrats, right? And today's generation is talking about gender roles, right?
Yeah.
And they're talking about like toxic masculinity,
I had to
right?
experience that with my 11-year-old,
Okay, there you go.
right? One of his schoolmates, she doesn't identify as a female.
Mm,
And it was an interesting conversation that I had to have with my son, right? It was like, okay, she doesn't identify as a female. He was like, but she's a female. Like,
interesting.
it's like, you know, from being a little kid, I think it's when do you start getting your features around 11, 12, around the time you start going through puberty is
Man,
when,
before hormones and
yeah,
food. But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
When you really start seeing the difference within the sexes, right? And you start identifying, oh, that's a boy, that's a girl. And besides that, when you're like 4 or 5 year old, everybody's kids. You don't really think, oh, that's a boy, that's a girl. Essentially, it was one of those things. It's like how at 11 years old do you say I'm not a female,
Mm,
right? That's my question. It's like, how do you just say I'm not a female? Like
right.
what inside of you tells you you're not a female?
Mm,
That
yeah, man. And then I was doing some research for this show, right? Like just so y'all don't think we come in here blind, right? Like we actually have a lot of in-depth conversations about these topics and we do research like outside of what we discuss in the show just so we can make sure we're adding value. But one thing that I'll say is when I was doing my research, I came across this video. It's actually a TED Talk, right? And the title of the TED Talk is Boys Won't Be Boys, Boys Will Be What We Teach Them to Be,
mm,
right? And that goes in line with, toxic masculinity versus regular masculinity or traditional masculinity, right? And
yeah,
let me start there. Let me backtrack a little bit. So for the people who are just joining us, today's topic is toxic masculinity and PIMP or pimp culture, right? So if you're watching this on the rebroadcast or you're watching it live, I just want everybody to be on the same page. So, masculinity, in my opinion, is what makes a man, right? So,
yeah,
essentially, meaning like men by nature, for the most part, are physically stronger than women, right? Like physically bigger than women. That's for the
yeah,
most part, right? And I believe that, at least in biology, right? That is what makes a man a man. That's what makes a man masculine, right?
mhm,
And then you start delving into like sexual preferences, right? Or even like testosterone, you're looking at it on a chemical level, right?
yeah,
So men by and large have more testosterone in our bodies. So even when, like a woman or a human is transitioning to becoming a man, right?
they
They'll take
take more testosterone.
right
Yeah,
like
yeah,
like hormones so there is something to being a man outside of like just an idea in our head, right? Like there is something that crafts us, and even men when it comes to building muscles, like Kat and I've been in the gym getting it in. Check out my stories. Right? We've been getting it in, right? And I'm
like right
excited
there,
to
huh?
like, yeah, like Cat's a big dude. He's a big dude, right? And I'm just like, man, if Cat was a woman and he looked like that, you would have a really interesting body shape. You got some like really broad shoulders, right? And I'm
Yeah,
like, I saw that on a woman. I don't know, right? Like there's a certain makeup to being a man. Like I feel like that's masculinity, right there. Like you look at somebody, you can tell, right? Like that's a man. You know what I'm saying? And
unless she
then
took after her dad.
there's that.
Yeah,
There's that.
that still plays with genes and hormones and different things like that as well.
And it's like this is such like this is such a good topic, but it's kind of like a sensitive subject, especially with the climate right now. We're like kind of still riding that wave of the Me Too movement, which 100% respect. Like I have a much better understanding now of like what women experience in and outside of Hollywood, like as a result of the Me Too movement, right?
Mm.
Also, I feel like it's important just to make note of, how do I say, like violence breeds violence, right? Or like violence concedes violence. So uh, that's we'll come back to that. But masculinity, right? And then toxic masculinity. Okay. I had to do a lot of research on this because as a man, especially, I feel like when our mentors do something and like our fathers do something and the actors we look up to and the rappers we look up to do something, it just like if you tell a lie long enough, it becomes the truth. I think Hitler said that, right? You tell a
Right.
lie long enough, it becomes the truth. And when it comes to like toxic masculinity, it's, man, when I was doing my research, I came across like don't be a pussy, right? Like stop acting like a wimp, or even as a matter of fact, I'm gonna read you a list, Kat. I'm gonna read you a list. There's like
Mhm.
4 or 5 things on this list, and I want you to tell me which, if any of these things, sound like toxic masculinity. Okay,
Mhm.
you ready for this? So
Yeah.
this is called behaviors of toxic masculinity. So, number one, extreme self reliance or the need to do everything on your own.
Mm.
Okay. So, extreme self reliance or the need to do everything on your own. Would you define that as toxic masculinity?
Not necessarily. No, not that one.
Yeah.
Toxic, wanting to do something on my own.
Yeah.
No, uh, a 7-year-old that loves doing things. He's a 7-year-old little boy, right?
Yeah.
He hasn't been exposed to any kind of like toxic masculinity. I feel like just because you want to figure things out on your own, or you have a want to do something on your own, why would that be toxic?
Right. And so I can definitely see how, like, because there's this old stereotype of like men won't ask for directions no matter how lost we are. Right? And
That
like, I mean, I get it. I get it. At the same time, we're going to figure it out. Right?
machismo thing, right?
Yeah. Like, we going to figure it out. Also, if you're watching this live, I want to hear from you. What is toxic masculinity? I know we have some female viewers as well. Thank y'all for joining us. We would really love your perspective, right? Like, what is toxic masculinity to you, right? Because that first one is definitely up for debate. But let me read the second one. All right.
And
So,
they identified that as toxic
toxic
masculinity,
masculinity, yeah. Extreme self
wanting to do
reliance.
something by yourself, wanting to
Right,
figure something out by yourself is toxic
right.
masculinity. I wonder
Toxic
who made
masculinity.
this list.
Yeah, and
Was it
I'm
Daniel?
interested too. I'm interested too. But number two is shame, disassociation, and avoidance of emotional expression. Hmm. So shame, disassociation, and avoidance of emotional expression. Is that toxic masculinity?
I can see how that could be toxic masculinity.
Okay, there
Right?
we go.
You're
So
hiding your emotions when you can't express yourself. That's a little bit more clear and defined in my eyes versus having the urge to figure something out by yourself or executing something by yourself.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I see, yes, Mrs. Catley, thank you for joining us, ma'am. But she said to me, toxic masculinity is telling a boy or man that he shouldn't cry or feel vulnerable. That's a
Mm,
good one.
yeah.
That's a really good one. And I was a sensitive kid, or like what you would define as a sensitive kid growing up, right? I didn't cry too much, but I feel like I felt things that either my boy cousins didn't feel or didn't express, right? I always, me growing up, I felt like the outsider because I was the one who, like, I've told you the story, like Valentine's Day, right? And how I would get like every girl that I liked, I would get her a gift or like flowers or like a box of chocolate or something like that. I did that for like all of middle school
Yeah.
up to my freshman year of high school,
And they
right?
got on you because they felt like you was a softie.
Bro, I mean, like I was pretty much shamed into stopping, right? And when I look back, it's like, would I do that again? I don't know. But at the time, nobody asked me to do it. It was just like,
But you felt at the moment.
right. And I also noticed I don't see any other men doing this for any woman who isn't their girlfriend or they're having sex with, right?
Yeah.
And I just like, I wasn't even doing it
It
like
was
to
your way
get
to express
her
your
to
little
see.
puppy love for the little
Yeah,
girl.
I mean, you get it,
Yeah.
right? And it was
I
like,
felt the same way. I want,
right,
Valentine's Day or whatever little thing to get a girl a little teddy bear or something like that to show that you liked her. Yeah, I feel
yeah,
like that's a normal thing in my eyes.
yeah, that's
We
real.
got another comment. It's telling a woman that she belongs in the kitchen, not in the boardroom.
Okay.
I feel like that's toxic masculinity. Yeah,
Yeah,
people.
that's yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Like that.
pretty.
That's dismissive.
Yeah,
That's not nice. That's not nice. And then so that I definitely agree. Like and it's so interesting because I feel like toxic masculinity is such a hot topic right now. One, because it exists, like it's very real. And also because by and large, like men have assumed control over this physical world, right?
Yeah,
Like at least what's within our abilities, right? Even when you look at, like Congress, when you look at every American president, when you look at most CEOs, when you look at the owners of sports teams, right? When you look at who owns and controls a majority of the wealth, right?
yeah,
It's by and large, it's men, right? I know that's not an accident, but at the same time, if you're a man watching this, like, man, I'm so sick of hearing about this subject. I feel like it's important for us as men to understand what role we play in this, right? And in all honesty, in a lot of ways, I would compare this conversation about toxic masculinity to the conversation about like how do I say it? Like compliance or like silence is violence. Like you heard that before, Kat? Silence
yeah,
is violence.
yeah,
Absolutely right. So like I've heard that a lot in the spaces where we talk about like racism. I feel like the first time I heard it was around the Michael Brown era, right?
yeah.
Like that summer of 2014, and there were a lot of white people up until that point who were saying like, well, my parents didn't own slaves, right? It's just like just these things, right?
I
To
give
kind
you
of
a pass.
yeah, like to dismiss the issue, right? Like,
Yeah,
oh, well, I'm not as bad as so and so, right? And just
yeah,
like these little comments, right? And I would say as men, we got to be careful not to assume like I'm not toxically masculine, right?
yeah,
Because we, for the most part, if you're an American watching this, we were all raised by the same television, right? We
yeah.
were all raised by the same music, unless you're like Muslim,
Same
right?
images and everything.
Same images, same internet, like same pornography, right? Like all these things that had a really profound impact on us in our conscious and our subconscious mind. So sometimes we don't even realize the things we might be saying and doing and thinking and believing. And even worse, we don't realize where it started,
Mm.
right? So thank you, Truth, for that comment because it is important, just to understand toxic masculinity is a thing. But I see, Britt, you want to read this, Cat? You want me to take it?
Go ahead. I got the last one. You go ahead and get this one.
I got you. So Bria said, I think toxic masculinity is when a man feels like he has to fit into the societal version of a man and let the things that are becoming self-destructive be taken out on others or skew their views of how to treat people, especially women and their children. Wow.
Mm.
Wow. That's really good. That's really good. And I want us to hold that thought, right? Toxic masculinity and self-destructiveness,
Yeah,
right? Like that's really, really good. You want to read the next one, Kat?
yeah. We got another one coming up. Oh, nope. Let's see. Got another one.
Where
Oh.
is that?
I also feel like when what's this? So I don't have my glasses
Oh,
on.
I got you. I got you,
Okay,
brother. So
go ahead.
she said, I also feel like when men assume they have certain authorities because they are men, like blaming the way women dress versus the way a man feels. Like he can sexually harass someone if they look at them a certain way. Wow. Forced sex and marriage, damn. Not acknowledging women in their positions, damn.
Mm.
Not taking responsibility for the trauma being caused in the community. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. We don't open a
Getting
can
deep
of
real
worms
quick.
yet. We don't open a can of worms, brother. We're
Yeah,
gonna have to put the worms back in the can.
yeah.
But go ahead, brother. Give me some feedback.
No, and I mean, we have to understand that um, it comes from both sides, right? It's something that we just can't blame the male because it's the environment, it's the community, it's things that we've been exposed to through our experiences to feel a certain way. We had a discussion prior to this show, and I was talking about pimps, right? The pimp culture. And I started throwing out names, and names that instantly came to me as pimps and that type of culture. Wesley was like, man, I didn't even think of that person as being a pimp, right? And hopefully we got some clips that we can pull up in a little while. And I want our viewers to look at it and say, well, is he really a pimp? Does his actions act like a pimp? Because in all honesty, you know, what's the difference? You know what I'm saying? So hopefully in a couple minutes, I know we're almost halfway through the show right now, we can pull up some of those clips and allow our viewers to understand. It's like, if we're going to identify, we have to identify from all aspects, right? And not just saying, oh, this has been created systematically in our community based on, just like Kwesi said, the music, the culture, everything that we've been exposed to growing up, right? And when do we make a change as a community, not allowing these things to be the cool thing anymore, right? Because we glorify some of these things. And I think that's another conversation that we have to have as a community. What are we glorifying in our community, allowing it to be the cool thing and accepting it and not questioning it and giving it, you know, giving it the energy that it doesn't need, right? So
yeah, and I really enjoy what's happening in this conversation because I feel like, well, first and foremost, I don't want any of the men to feel attacked, right? Like I know as men, even though we may not embrace it all the time, like we can be pretty sensitive. I know if you're a man watching this, like you can at least agree to the fact like we can be a little sensitive sometimes or a little easily triggered, even though we may only feel safe expressing it as anger or expressing it as like shutting down emotionally. That's something called a trigger that takes us to a place emotionally that we don't want to be or we don't want to acknowledge. So in this conversation, we definitely don't want any of the men to feel like, oh my goodness, here they go again. You know, talking about men is the same thing my sister does. It is the same thing my girlfriend does. Like, it's not that at all, right? This is an open conversation. If you are a man watching this, comment. We want to hear from you too, right? Like, I see the ladies lighting it up,
we want a
giving us
balanced
some,
conversation.
yeah, balanced conversation. And I know some of these women who are commenting, and I know they don't hate men, right? It's not that kind of situation. And obviously, Kat and I don't hate men. We are men, right?
Yeah.
But I do realize that there have been times in my life, right? Taking personal responsibility. There have been times in my life where I acted out of toxic masculinity without even knowing what it really was, right? Like I haven't always been this super nice guy that's married and got a beautiful wife and like living an amazing life. Like I had to work my way to this by going through it, by growing through it, right? And I'm very grateful for the experiences I've had in my life that have brought me to a point where I can look back without being ashamed of who I used to be. Even though there was a point in my life, I was very proud of some of the actions that I took and the ways that I moved in the streets. I was very proud of that. But now I look back, I went through my shame, right? I went through my cleansing phase. And now I realize that was me, but a different part of my life. So all that we're saying here today is the way that you are or the way that you see other people acting around you, I want you to have a choice as to whether or not you want to continue to be that, if you want to continue to do that, right? And if by the end of this conversation, you've at least been introduced to a new perspective, our job is done.
Yeah.
Our job is done. So, Kat, I would love to get some feedback from you, but I do got another video I want to show to the people. So give us some words and then we'll get it going.
You said feedback after the video or before the video?
Before or after? It's up to you.
let's get the video. Let's get the video.
So I want to pull this up real quick because some of y'all might remember watching cartoons as a kid, right? I love cartoons. I mean, like I watched Rugrats when I was really young, and then they had like Rugrats all grown up. They had Rocket Power. They had the Proud Family. They had Animaniacs, right? Like I watched all those cartoons. I was an addict, right? And one of my favorite cartoons was Johnny Bravo, right? My father loved that show too, and I didn't understand why he loved that show until I got older, right? But what I'm going to show you is some things from Johnny Bravo. Like this is a cartoon that was on Cartoon Network, right? With Dexter's Laboratory and was Cat Dog on Cartoon Network? I can't remember, but all these other cartoons, right? It might have been. And I'm going to it's a short little clip, but I'm going to show you some of the things in Johnny Bravo we may not have caught as kids. So I'm going to pull this up real quick, Brother Cat. We're going to talk to the people. Man.
Oh.
Favorite Cartoon Network shows back in the day. It had everything. Babes, bizarre adventures, and badass celebrity guests. The main character is a dim-witted, muscular, self-proclaimed womanizer, so you know this show has tons of dirty jokes. I'm Whitney Van Lanningham, and these are the dirtiest dirty jokes in Johnny Bravo. Number 8. In this episode, a real sensitive cat rolls into town and tries to teach Johnny how to be more sensitive for the ladies. Of course, Johnny doesn't quite get it at first, so he really has to spell it out for him.
How'd you bag that babe?
Oh, fella, somebody's got to teach you a thing or two about sensitivity. Sensitivity. Show that girl you really give a D.
I'm pretty sure that guy just gave her the D, but he did it respectfully, so that's what counts, right? Number 7. When little Susie invites Johnny to her birthday party, Johnny doesn't give her the answer she's looking for right away. Actually, the answer he gives her is kind of messed up if you think about it.
This is little Susie from next door. Will you come to my birthday party today?
I am busy. Call me in 15 years when you're a co-ed.
Yeah, dude. Asking a child to call you when she's old enough to fuck you isn't gross at all. Number 6. In this scene, a little girl sees Johnny checking out a fitness magazine at the bookstore and decides to call him out in front of everyone.
Look, Mommy! He's looking at pictures of almost naked men!
This is a men's fitness magazine. I want to look like this, not at this. I got nothing to be ashamed of. TV Guide.
Is it just me? Or did Johnny seem a little too defensive when the kid questioned his manhood? Number 5. When Johnny gets shot in the arm by a poisonous dart, he uses his last 6 seconds of consciousness as wisely as humanly possible.
Al, you have 6 seconds of consciousness left. Use them wisely.
Yep, that was probably some good old-fashioned softcore centerfold porn. Number 4. After Johnny gets kidnapped by the Amazons and taken to the top of a volcano, we learn a little too much about his V-card status.
Oh, great Athena, we give you this virgin as a sacrifice to your beauty and womanhood.
Did she say virgin?
I used to watch the show in 3rd grade. How did they let Cartoon Network create a show about a guy who bangs a lot of bitches air after school? The late 90s and early 2000s was a very different time in animation. Number 3. A few moments later, Melissa pushes Johnny into the volcano, which erupts and sends him flying to a different kind of sexy island.
Hi there. Welcome to the island of beautiful men. I can already tell you're going to feel right at home here.
Son, you look like you could use a refresher. We're all about to take a swim. I've got an extra swimsuit if you'd care to join us.
Hey man, sexuality exists on a spectrum. Johnny's overt heterosexuality has got to be an overcompensation for whatever trouser feelings he undoubtedly felt on the island of beautiful men, right? No judgment. Number 2. When little Susie invites her cousin Farrah Fawcett to play pin the tail on the donkey at her birthday party, things get really dirty really quickly.
This is so much fun. I can't remember the last time I was blindfolded. Oh, wait. Yes, I can. Oops.
Sounds like Farrah Fawcett's into some kind of kinky shit in the bedroom. Tight! Number 1. Johnny's in need of a job, so he tries out working at the Troubled Teen Hotline. Unfortunately, I think he thought he was working for the Be Hot, Be Naughty, Be Courteous phone sex hotline from Rocco's Modern Life.
Troubled teen hotline. Your boyfriend left you? So, what are you wearing? Why?
That's not what they meant by trouble.
Oh my goodness. So, Kat, you already know the deal. First takes, hot takes. Talk to me.
It was a lot of that. There was a lot of underlining messages in things like that when we were growing up, right? That as innocent little kids, we didn't think twice about. But now as adults, now we get the joke or we get the message, right?
Right.
And there's still stuff like that. There's still a whole bunch of stuff like that in kids' entertainment. So the question being is how do we, like, we'll sit there like you said, you sat there with your father that's cracking up because he's getting everything that's talking, right? He's like, oh man, you know. And I would sit there and watch stuff with my dad and other adult figures, you know, in my life, and watch things of that nature, and they would crack up, and I'm just thinking it's funny because it's a cartoon, and they thinking it's funny because they understand the actual content of what they're talking about, right?
Yeah.
So how do we change that in our community?
Man, that's an amazing question, because one thing that stood out to me when I watched that video, other than the commentator, but one thing that stood out to me was that I saw all these things as a kid, and even though consciously I wasn't aware of them, subconsciously my mind stored it, right?
Yeah.
So everything, and that was just like a few clips from a few episodes. That was pretty much the entire show. And like I said, that was one of my favorite shows. It aired on Cartoon Network for a long time, right? I loved that show. And when I look back, I'm like, what did I love about it, right? Like, it was funny, but at the same time, like watching those clips, rewatching those clips in my conscious mind, it's like, oh my goodness, like this is programming, right? Like I was being programmed, and now I look back on like some of my role models, right? Johnny Bravo, a freaking cartoon, was one of my role models because he was always chasing women. And I just thought in my mind as a young, like 7-8-year-old kid, oh, I should be chasing women.
You ever heard of Pepe Le Pew? He was always trying to get the cat.
Bro,
right?
Of course. Bro, of course.
He was chasing her, he'd do whatever it takes. He was the lover man, right?
Yeah.
Like, especially during those times, it was very distinctive roles and sexual innuendos in those cartoons, you know.
Yeah.
And it has to affect a person, like you said, on a subconscious level when you start getting of age, and then you start thinking of women and different things like that, at least coming from a male's perspective of how, oh, okay, it's okay to have more than one female. You know what I'm saying? And then coming from a female's perspective, it's okay for a guy to have more than one female. You know what I'm saying? Like, it has to work both ways. Like, as much as it did something to us as males seeing that, it had to have young females feel a certain way about themselves and what they allow a male to do as well.
Absolutely. And I know it goes back to what one of our viewers was saying a few minutes ago about basically the devaluing of women, right? Like that's toxic masculinity at its core, I believe, right? And I know, being somebody who has suffered from that, right? Who has suffered from what I didn't realize was programming, right? Programming to believe certain things about myself, right? Programming to believe certain things about women who make up at least half of the world's population, right? And not understanding these thoughts and feelings that I have aren't completely mine, right? And I believe that as men, especially, right, as leaders of the world, as leaders in our communities, and leaders in our homes, it's more important than ever to engage in these discussions. Because if you have daughters, your daughters are going to go to college one day, right? If you have sons, your sons are going to go out into the world one day. And what kind of human beings are we putting into the world? When, like, I'm not saying don't watch the cartoons, right? I'm not saying don't watch the movies. I am saying have a discussion, right? Be aware, if not hyper aware, because those things lead to real life consequences, right? Like, Kat, do you remember there was the case with this Harvard student who like drugged this girl and dragged her behind a trash can and like raped her? Like, do you remember that? You remember that
know
case?
that specific one, but I've heard different things of like that happening on college campuses and stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay, that's what toxic masculinity does,
Yeah.
right? Like when you can devalue a human body to the point where like it belongs to me because I said so, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the conversation that we're having. So it's not just about these cute cartoons and talking about music and like all these different pimps that we didn't really know what pimp. It's bigger than that, right? Because these things, these images, especially that are shown to us at young ages, as you know, it has this profound impact on our minds and the way that we see the world. And the way we see the world is going to determine how we move in the world, how we interact with other people, how we interact with ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. And like ultimately, as we said in the beginning of the show, the whole objective is to one, engage in conversation, but two, introduce you to a new perspective. Right. Because I know some of the things that I did, especially when I was back in college, right? When I finally moved out the house and I was out and living like Johnny Bravo, right? Like those were at the time some of the funnest moments in my life, right? Oh wow. Okay. Let's read this title. This looks like a really good comment. So, okay, let me take this one. Let me take this one. So, this comment says, "This is some guy's response about this discussion." I like that. Some guys. Anonymous. Thank you for tagging me, but I kind of think cancel culture is taking it too far nowadays. Being a man is very confusing on where the line is of what is acceptable. I don't really even hit on women at all anymore. Even that language, hit on women, right? And that's common late. Like, oh, did you hit on her, bro? And it's like, what does that actually mean, right? But anyway, so I don't really even hit on women at all anymore because you really never know what is or is not acceptable. Bro, stay in the game, bro. Stay in the game. It's one thing to be polite and respectful, but it's another thing when a man can't be appreciated just for being an intelligent man. Uh-oh. I don't know. I'm still into manners and morals. Good point. Good point. Kat, give me some thoughts, brother.
Yeah. Like we have to understand that I know I'm not in the dating world anymore, but if I was, it's like when you approach that woman and you're just showing general interest, right? How is she going to take this? How do I go up and approach a woman without offending her and just wanting to get to further know a woman these days? Just like this gentleman is saying, like it's so many lanes being created saying, "Oh, this is offensive. This is offensive," but to who, right? We also have to understand who's creating that narrative for everybody to say, "Oh, yes, that is offensive," right? Where does that? Who determines these things for the greater culture of everybody? What do you see? Where do you see it going, Brother Kwesi?
I see that there, I mean, obviously, like with all things, there's an agenda, right? And I believe this goes back to like either our first or second show, right? And what are we on, like show 10 now? Goodness gracious, we lighten it up. We lighten it up, brother. It's hot. I remember our first or second show, we were talking about like what it means to be a black man in America and just doing a quick introduction of why we started the show. One of the subjects that came up is an agenda, right? And how everybody has an agenda, right? That doesn't make it an inherently bad thing to have an agenda, but I do believe like when we live in a society where especially the main like media networks, right, are showing things to our children that we don't want them to see at such a young age, or we don't want them to see without context, right? But you have a lot of parents, especially in like inner city communities who like come from where we come from, where the TV is pretty much raising your child, right? What's up?
I forget I think it's called the Loud House. think it's a cartoon called The Loud House.
Mm.
Don't quote me on that, right?
Okay.
But it's a show. It's a show where it's a boy that's his family has like 10 kids or something like that, right? And he's the only boy. Everybody else, I believe, is girls. He has nothing but sisters. He's the only boy, right? This guy's best friend in the cartoon has two dads in the cartoon, right? Having that narrative, right? In the sense of, like you said, if you're not raising your kids, if you're not seeing exactly those images that are being planted into their head, why is it cool for a network to think that's appropriate to show a kid?
Cat. Red alert. Red alert. No.
I'm just saying. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, that's real. That's real.
just,
It is, and that takes me to the conversation around like praying in school and saying the Pledge of Allegiance and just all these things that we give like these institutions, right? We give them power over our children. And in essence, I mean, there are a lot of kids who spend more time at school than they do at home, right? They eat better at school than they do at home. They have a safer environment at school than they do at home, right? And like all these things I feel are by design in a lot of ways. So even when it comes down to this conversation about toxic masculinity, this is rooted in an even deeper conversation, right? And I want all of us to be really aware that you can't have one without the other, right? So for example, there's a lot of conversation around toxic masculinity, but almost no conversation around toxic femininity, right? When that's a thing, right? Like talking to you as somebody who was raised by a mother who like, I questioned for a lot of my life, does this woman even love me, right? From a very, very young age, right? And before we even had words like toxic, right? Before we even had words like abuse, right? Or being dismissive, right? These are things that are felt by a lot of people. And I feel like it, even going back to the comment that Truth left, right? About this gentleman who was saying it's hard for him to talk to women because he doesn't know what to say, right? Like that's real. That's very real. And I never want anybody to do anything from an anxious state, right? Or like a fearful state, because more than anything, I feel like that's what produces toxic masculinity, right? Or toxic anything is acting out of this state of anxiety, acting out of this state of fear, and using toxic masculinity, for example, as like an extra shield to your ego, right? And it's like, oh, well, man, fuck that bitch, right? Like she wasn't even cute anyway, right? And just saying and doing all kinds of disrespectful things, but it goes both ways, right? Like I listen to the music nowadays, and basically what a lot of men were saying in the 90s, a lot of women are saying today. Like everything, it comes full circle, right? With this like bitches ain't shit but hoes and tricks. And now you got this like I fucked him and I took all the money out of his wallet, like rap genre, right? And it's like that doesn't make it better, right? Like I know it sounds good, but ultimately, do we want our daughters to listen to that, right? Do we want our sons to listen to that? Do we want them to emulate that? Because if we don't have these conversations, we're allowing these things to happen, right? But I see a really, really good comment from Bria. You want me to take this one, brother?
Go ahead.
All right, wonderful. So I know we're coming to a close. Thank y'all so much for being here, by the way. Whether you're watching this live or on the rebroadcast or somebody shared this with you, please join us every Tuesday, same time, 5 o'clock Pacific Standard. We are here live to have these discussions, ultimately to help the world here. But I see Bria said we need people to be put in these power positions to start to change these views. Oh, example, teachers, politicians, officers, directors, filmmakers, TV show makers, the places where an individual is reaching a large amount of people at once in a position of authority. That's good.
Do we design our kids to want to be in that position of authority, though, as a community? Question, right? Like I have a friend that just became SFPD, right? And he grew up in the hood and the whole thing. And it's like we complain about police officers policing our community and treating our community a certain way, right? But how many of us are going for that position to register as a police officer for our community, to monitor our own community? So I mean that's just another conversation we have to have in future episodes, right? It's like we want these changes, we want these things, but how many of us are actually having that conversation within our families, our households, to present that to our kids? It's like, hey, we need more people on these different levels to show our perspective, or even just a more well-rounded perspective. You know what I'm saying? Like, how many cartoons look like us at the end of the day,
Right.
or have our narrative in our community? We're getting a lot of great comments.
Yeah. And this, I love how y'all hop on at the end, coming to the party all late. The club about to close. But anyway, I see Lexi. I think it's I'm a writer. Lexi, I'm a writer. That's a pretty dope comment. So they said no one will change these views. There's a gender war going on, and Black men are falling for it. SMH. That means shaking my head for all the 40 and ups watching. But they said that no one will change these views. There's a gender war going on, which is so interesting. And Black men are falling for it, which is even more interesting. Lexi, I would love to get some more of your comments or some more of your feedback, because I don't want to take anything out of context. But Kat, that actually reminds me of the conversation that we had started when we were first talking about this episode, right? And like what the discussion was going to be, how we were going to engage the audience. And I remember the other individual in the room said something really similar, right? About like a gender war that's going on. And would you like to get some feedback on that?
I felt that it was very interesting, because it's a time where a lot of people, like we were discussing earlier in this episode, feel like, okay, there's no identifying our genders, our sexes, or anything, right? It's just openness to everything. Oh, if you want to be a man today, you can be a man. Tomorrow, you want to be a woman, whatever the case may be. But in the grand scheme of things, what were you designed to be? You know what I'm saying? What is the essence? What's the roots of what you're supposed to bring to this world as is, right? And why do you have to change the perfection of who you are? That was the conversation. I mean, this is how this topic initially started. When we had this discussion, it was like, this sounds like it's going to be a pretty good topic. And as it grows, it just branches off into more and more topics as we dive in deeper within this discussion. So what was something that you took away from that conversation when we initially had it?
Man, the first thing that I took away, and I would say the main thing I took away, is that there's a lot of confusion right now. There's a lot of confusion, and people, like humans, aren't necessarily sure who or what to follow, right? Because there's it seems, generally speaking, there's a direction that, at least, I mean, we're in America, right? Like there's a whole world outside of America. I've traveled outside of America, and I've seen like not everybody lives like Americans, but I do know America has such a stronghold over what's put out into the world, right? And what's broadcast into the world. And one thing that I've seen the last, like, I'll say 5 to 10 years is a major movement towards like this, how do I say it? Kind of like gender neutrality, or like kind of like gender non-conforming, right? And I don't want to get these terms wrong, because I kind of graduated right before this movement took off, right? Graduated from college before like the gender non-conforming movement really took off. But I've seen like these new topics and these new definitions come up. It's not just a man or a woman anymore, right? Like you have transgender, you have gender non-conforming, you have like non-binary, right? You have what we call like cisgender, or like heteronormative. And these are just like ones I'm thinking of off the top of my head. I know there are so many more than that, but it's like, at the end of the day, I love the question that you asked, Kat. Like, what were you made to be, right? And I don't mean in terms of a man or a woman, but in all honesty, right? Like, what were you made to be? Not by man, not by these influences, but by our Creator, right?
Yeah.
Like, what were you designed to be? And I feel like, in your heart of hearts and your soul of souls, you know, right? Like that spirit power is so much more powerful than anything physical in this plane of existence. And Kat, if you give me 30 seconds, I want to drop some on the people that changed my life. Is that okay?
Right
Okay.
ahead.
So I know we touched on this in our last episode with Devona, the fitness coach, right? That was an amazing episode. If you haven't watched it yet, go to Spotify, go to YouTube, tap in with that. But in that conversation, we started talking about, movement as meditation, but also how we're spiritual beings, right? And I want y'all to catch this. Stay with me, okay? We're spiritual beings, right? And that means everything that you see with your physical eyes is only a fraction of what we actually are, right? And in all honesty, like the least important part, because this is a meat suit, right? Like this is the earth suit that you wear during your time here in this existence on the physical plane. Meaning, you should probably take care of your body, by the way, get with Kat for your physical fitness needs.
Body, but your mental state and your spiritual state. You gotta.
Amen.
It's all one.
It's all one. It's all one. But to conclude that point, you have a spiritual mind. You have spiritual eyes that are more than just your physical eyes that you see and perceive the world with. As a matter of fact, I want you to think about this. Your eyes don't have a brain, right? Your eyes are a tool that your brain uses to identify the world around you. So your eyes are picking up images. Like if you're watching this live, you probably see my hands doing all these things, right? Your eyes are picking that and sending these images to your brain, and your brain is doing its best to make sense of it. So my hands might not even be doing this. They might not even be doing this, but that's what your brain is telling you my hands are doing based on the other experiences that your brain has collected from the world and the experiences that you've had. And I want you to take that in and attach that to this topic of toxic masculinity. Attach this to this topic of who are you designed to be? Are you living your life the best way possible, right? Or is it just the best way you know how? Or are there room for improvement for the way that you're living, the way that you perceive the world, and the way that you interact with the other human beings around you, whether they be male or female, right? So I just wanted to put that into the universe one time, but talk to me, Kat.
Yeah, I think we got to end the show on that one. I think that's it all.
That's it.
Yeah. So, Brother Kwesi, we got some future episodes coming up, but like always, we want our viewers to let us know what future topics would y'all be interested in us having, because we also, as you know, we get coaches as well to bring on to the show to help everybody grow within the community. This is not just, like I said earlier in the show, just me and Brother Kwesi just preaching to the greater community. It's us having a conversation, going back to our old school roots of having a conversation, discussion, different points of views, not judging anybody for their thoughts or anything, just allowing all our minds to expand at once, right? Because until we're presented with certain information, we can have a one-track mind and not understand other people's perspectives and not allowed to grow, right? And be like, man, I never even thought about it that way. Because I know many of these conversations that we have on this show, just like me and Brother Kwesi said, we have sideline conversations that develop into these conversations that we present to our community and see where it goes and the healing around it. Because these are very deep topics in our community, sometimes that are never addressed, right? Because it's never put on the table, because we take these narratives and just kind of just like brush them off to the side, right? And sometimes without addressing these topics, change won't happen. and we want change. That's the whole vision of Heal the Hood. How can we go into our own community and create the change that we need amongst each other, right? How do we heal together? How do we have these conversations, adult conversations, without, pointing fingers, pointing blame, or anything like that? So I'm thankful for everybody that was commenting this evening. I love all the different perspectives that we had. I love the way we're able to sit essentially at a round table as adults and continue to build with each other. Because until we can build and have these conversations, I feel like there's a there's a lack of growth in our community. And with every conversation we have, we continue to see more growth, right?
Amen. Amen.
Yes,
And
sir.
on that note, so Kat, where can they find you, brother? Talk to me.
Well, first of all, I want to make sure they know where to find the podcast. Make sure you follow us on our Heal the Hood podcast page on IG. If you want to re-listen to this broadcast, you can go onto our Spotify account to Heal the Hood on Spotify, and onto our Heal the Hood 2020 page on Facebook to see the live broadcasting over again. But if you want to find your man Cat, go to IG. You can find me on Cat Fitness 3 on Instagram, Cat Fitness on Facebook, Cat Fitness on YouTube, and the website is catfitnesswellnesscenter.com, y'all. Where can they find you?
Amen. Amen. So, as you know, my name is Kwesi Dreams. I'm one of the co-founders, along with my beautiful wife, Mega Dreams. We're the co-founders of Alignment Agency, where wealth and wellness unite. If you have any questions about insurance, about investments, about how to manage your money, about how to produce multiple streams of income, about how to build generational wealth, how to get a living trust or a will, any questions about anything money related, or you just want to have a cool conversation, reach out to me on Instagram at Kwesi.dreams. You can find me on Facebook at Alignment Agency, spelled exactly how it sounds. Or you say, what do you? And I'll pop up behind you. It is what it is.
You pop up like the genie in the Aladdin bottle, huh?
I'm there and I'm ready to work. Let's build. Let's build.
So once again, make sure before you hop off, y'all, if you got value out of this conversation or just enjoyed the conversation in general, make sure you first hit that share button. You also hit that like button and continue to comment. The comments are coming in very quickly as we're wrapping up the show. We might have to address some of these comments after the show and continue this conversation because we're getting a lot of great energy coming in. But otherwise, make sure you tune in every Tuesday at 5 p.m., y'all. And like I said, we love the community of telling us and allowing us to have these conversations and giving us feedback on future topics that we want to have. Right? We want to have as a community, things that we want to bring to the round table and better understand from both points of view, right? There's no right or wrong. We have to understand that it's just different points of view, different understanding. Until we come together as a community, there can't be no growth. There's no moving forward, right? And I think some higher ups hope that we don't have these conversations because then, everything stays the way it is and the programming continues, y'all. So on that note, we will see you next week. We love each and every one of y'all, and we'll stay tuned next time. All right, y'all?
Hey.
Peace, everybody. Have a great one.